Hello, this is Mad Cat, the Angry Egalitarian, and today is another edition of Dixon Boobs Smash Matriarchy.
Boobs and
And
dicks.
today, and today is a very special episode because we do have this guest on with us today, who is going to talk to us about domestic violence, his experience, and his special project. Now, as always, I'm Dick.
I'm boobs. Sorry, I was staring at my boobs.
I don't blame you for wanting to stare at your boobs all day long. I mean, I know I do. Wait, that sounded creepy. Oh well.
Nah, that's most men on the internet. Don't worry.
Okay. So, today we have Amal. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah,
Okay. How are you doing today, sir?
great. Really excited.
All right. So, for those who don't know, Mal, who's going to talk about this more, is doing a special documentary. He wants to discuss male domestic violence or domestic violence of male victims. And as we all know, anyone who comes to my channel probably knows this, men are the most ignored when it comes to domestic violence, unless they are the perpetrator. We live in this world today where we believe that women are so weak and so innocent that they could not hurt a man. Or if they do, it was provoked. But we know better that there really is an epidemic out there that women are hurting men and no one cares. And my friend here, he wants to say, you know what, here it is. This is actually happening. We have it on film, or probably not the actual attacks on film, but actually talking about it and getting it into people's households to talk about it. So, I guess my first question for you today, Mal, is the title. You have it as Male Tears, and I'll be honest with you. When I first saw male tears and domestic violence, I'm like, oh God, this is going to be like a feminist thing about how, men complain that they have domestic violence, and it's like men don't have a right to complain about that. But then I actually started looking at it, and it's like, oh, this is fantastic. This needs to get made. But still, the title, Male Tears, because Male Tears is used as a way to put men down, of like, I'm drinking from a male tears cup. So how do you respond to like the male tears mug or the title? Why go with such a controversial name?
Well, actually, we were considering calling it Nothing to Forgive, which was based on a very long journey I had learning about and practicing forgiveness. Coming to a place of non-duality, the approach where all things are not two but one, and eventually there's nothing to forgive. It's kind of there's an arc of a journey there when you start forgiveness. But then we realized that it does not connote domestic violence at all. So it really had nothing to do with the topic. And then somebody joked about the male tears mug stuff, and you should call it male tears. And at first, of course, that was a joke, and I thought, well, no, that's ridiculous. But then then I thought about it, and I thought, well, wait a minute. If you take male tears and you think about male victims of domestic violence, that's it becomes poetic. Because these men are crying real tears. They're going through incredible suffering and pain. And to take that derogatory, derisive, belittling thing and sort of put it in the perspective of real hurt, pain, agony, suffering, depression, anxiety, really juxtaposes the attitude that creates this wall of silence around it with the reality of the pain that people suffer. So that's why we went with that.
And me and Mal, We had a long, long conversation on Skype about all of this, and it was a fantastic discussion because, certainly I learned
Yeah.
it from him, and I think he learned a few things from me, but definitely me a lot from him. But something we talked about on one of your videos, you were laughing or making a joke about something, and I think that might have confused people a little bit, and I perfectly understand it, but could you take a quick moment to respond to how are you able to laugh about any of this?
Right. Yeah, I think I was doing a chat with somebody, and I was cracking a joke, and I was laughing about something that happened to me. And the interviewer asked me, "Okay, you're talking about something incredibly horrific and terribly sad. How can you be laughing about this?" And I, to put that in perspective, had I been talking about this subject maybe a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, I would have been a crying puddle. Like, I would have just been completely melting down and just, yeah. So I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of work with a lot of different approaches, and did a lot of soul searching and talked to a lot of people who asked incredibly difficult questions, and including what's funny about this. And I had a wonderful therapist who actually was trained in the use of comedy to help heal people who are suffering through cancer. Working with her was a real blessing because we wound up, okay, a year and a half. Half the time I was crying, but the other half I was like laughing my ass off with her. And that's where I got to. And it's a wonderful thing. If you think about comedians, basically, you know how a lot of comedians are incredibly depressed and they've had horribly traumatic lives. A lot of them commit suicide, they have addiction problems. But mostly what they do is they take their trauma and they reframe it. They take you to this place where you're incredibly uncomfortable, you're talking about something horrible, and then you're laughing at it. And I think that's a wonderful approach. You know, I don't know much about the psychology of it, but it's better to laugh than cry all the time.
Yeah,
I
it's
agree.
yeah,
I was going to say one of the reasons that I started doing YouTube videos was because talking to feminists and just really crazy people online used to kind of give me like panic attacks. But now, usually all I do is just laugh, and it's my motto for my channel and my Facebook page and all that is to laugh at everything because I think that's a great way to deal with things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the healing journey to come to a place where you can chuckle about a few things, and
Hmm.
it's not an avoidance thing. You have to you have to assess and
Yeah.
fully integrate your experience into and face it and cry those tears. But at some point you're done crying, and then you know at some point you start to be able to see a few things that are funny.
Hmm.
Um, but, uh, yeah, so I could give you an anecdotal thing, but I don't want to waste anybody's time. So
well, no, you'll get plenty of time to tell anecdotes, but yeah, let's go ahead and we got a lot to discuss today. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
I guess the next thing I think people really do need to hear about is, what was your experience? I mean, certainly you are, and I don't like to use the word, but it's also most appropriate. You were a victim of domestic violence, and you're also now a survivor of it. But what was it that you specifically went through?
Well, it's funny. Let me sort of start by saying that I wasn't even aware through not really being able to face it and a good dose of denial how bad it really was until I was in therapy. And it was framed for me that the experience that I had was on the edge of extreme. Uh, the definition of extreme violence from the police would be is bloodshed, broken bones, that type of thing. So the level of violence that I experienced, I sustained a few injuries, and over the course of about a year, a lot of stuff, different types of physical violence. But I also experienced a lot of psychological violence, a lot of humiliation, a lot of verbal attacks and emotional stuff, and financial and sexual abuse as well. So I got the full meal deal. um, and yeah, it was all in the menu basically as far as that experience goes. And I don't mind talking about the details, whatever is relevant. So if you want to pick through anything, go ahead. It was bad, basically, really bad. Oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
She broke a tooth. She broke my toe with a door. She threw me around a lot. She choked me. She scratched my face. She beat me up a lot. She pushed me downstairs and upstairs. Actually, it's hard to push somebody upstairs and downstairs. It takes a lot of energy. But she was a real, go-getter. And she kicked me in the groin, and she ripped my clothes off, and she did a lot of strangling. She really liked to throw me against the walls a lot. And but she also did a lot of the other kinds of abuse, like control stuff, which included taking away my clothes and taking away my blanket, pillows, taking away the phone, taking away the computer, taking away the TV. Like, I'm talking the cords, like taking away,
Oh my goodness!
crawling underneath the computer thing and taking away the cords, and like taking away the cords for the TV. Getting rid of the phone and locking me out of the house. She locked me in the basement for about a couple of times. She locked me in the basement, wouldn't let me up, and also, but I wound up staying in the basement because it was safer. And yeah, so it was a real severely extreme area of violence. And actually, I can say that I'm a actual survivor because the tooth that she broke, after I left, it got infected because it was cracked, but it was still in my mouth. And I didn't know this. I went to the dentist, and she looked and said, "Okay, your tooth is hopelessly broken." I was like, "What does that mean?" And she said, "Well, we can't save it." And she said, "More bad news. It's horribly infected, and that's life-threatening, and it's got to be pulled or you're going to die." And when you go to the dentist, you expect to hear about fluoride, you expect to hear about cavities, you do not expect to hear about death. Right? Like, that does not come up in a dentist's office. So I freaked out. I think that was the moment when I actually really realized how severe this was. Like, wow. I'm sitting in a dentist office, and I'm looking at her and her assistant, I'm up in the chair, and like their faces are looking at me, and it's like, fuck, I'm going to die if you guys don't have an intervention. So that's when I realized, wow, I better do something positive with this scenario, and I kind of flipped things around at that moment.
So I want to take a quick question from the chat.
Yeah.
Sure.
Catrice, a friend of mine. She says, what were the details of the psychological abuse? Like, did she attempt to convince you it was your fault, you deserved it, so on? And I want to add a little bit to that.
Sure.
Do you know why she was doing this to you? I mean, was she? Did she blame you for it? Was she aware of why she was doing it? And do you know, like, the circumstances behind why she was doing it?
Okay, let me take those three questions on in detail. Firstly, what was the details of the psychological abuse? It started, as it often does in any abusive relationship, it starts with coercion and control. And a lot of running you down, making you feel bad about yourself. Actually, I didn't realize this until I had gotten into talking to some counselors and people about it. I suppose psychologically it started really early on, when she got really upset all the time, and you know that walking on eggshells thing. At first, you know, it was great. By the way, um, you know, she didn't start off looking bad to me. You know, I dated her for a reason. She's a lovely lady when I met her, and incredibly intelligent, incredibly articulate. She kicks ass at Scrabble, um, and you know, I just love spending time with her. We had amazing conversations. It's the same thing that everybody goes through when you first start today. She looked great on paper. So anyway, pretty soon, you know, she got really touchy. And look, I had been married for 20 years before this relationship, so I knew how to, you know, deal with squabbles and how to live with somebody and resolve conflict. Um, my divorce was a slow drift because we got married so young, right? And that happens a lot, right? Um, so psychologically, I suppose it started off with her being really, really touchy, to the point where I had to have a talk with her. She was getting upset 4 times a day, and I remember going to my girlfriend and going, "What am I going to do? You know, you're upset all the time. I mean, I say something, and then you're gone in the bedroom, and you're sitting there looking comatose." It was like that, you know. I think I remember once she was talking about wanting to take a dance class, and I said something along the lines of, "Oh, wow, that's really cool. I didn't think about you as a dancer." Now, that's a pretty innocuous thing, right? She was gone for 2 days, didn't talk to me in the bedroom, like, really upset. That's psychologically, like, because you wind up walking around going, "Girlfriend, why are you comatose? What did I say?" You know? And then not telling me what I said, and that sort of stuff. Started that way. The other psychological bit was sexual. Pretty early on, she told me that she wasn't happy with my performance in bed. And thank you for asking me this question, by the way. I get to embarrass myself on
I just
YouTube.
get to carry on the cycle of abuse, you know.
Right. Yeah, thanks. Anyway, so apparently I suck at sex, and she told me so. But, you know, in a real relationship, you have this conversation. Let's say you're a lady, and you're talking to your boyfriend, and you say, "Look, I'm not really happy with this," but then you say, "Look, I really like it when you do this," or "I'd love it if you tried this," or "Can we blah, blah, blah." You have a conversation. That didn't happen. I was just left in the dark, like, "Oh, great, I suck. You're not happy. What the fuck am I going to do?" You know, I mean, I didn't want to lose her, right? So I felt a lot of pressure about sexual performance. And it was just about taking me down. Like, oh God, I couldn't even do the dishes right. Like, you know, I know how to wash dishes, but no, you have to do the glasses first, apparently. And, you know, and then, yeah. And I couldn't even make a cup of tea right. It was bringing me down on everything I fucking did every day. It was pressure. It was like being in a pressure cooker. So yeah, that was the beginning of the psychological stuff, and it got worse from there. I mean, but you know, that's sort of like down the road in the you know, in the relationship. You know, there was a lot more psychological stuff. I mean, you know, you know, I would be vulnerable in some way, and then she would attack that. If I told her that something that was romantic, she would make fun of me and basically let me know that she was not really into the relationship that much, and that I was kind of an yeah, I know. It wasn't very good. It didn't feel good, and I can almost feel it now. Just that feeling of like, fuck, you know. She said some really the meanest things anybody's ever said to me ever, you know, and and all that. So yeah, okay. So that was like just a touching base on the psychological stuff. And you asked me 2 other questions. One was, what was it? I can't remember what they were actually.
Well,
Something about was she aware of?
yeah, if she was aware of, like, well, the basic question was, you know, did she like blame you? You know, did she
Oh
say,
right.
"Oh, everything is your fault," you know, this because you do this that really pisses me off, which you've kind of answered, but also, do you know like the story behind why she was like this?
Yeah. Well, okay. she didn't actually blame me for her behavior until after it was over. She sent an email to my friend Tucker, who's actually making this documentary with me, uh, saying that she absolves herself of all guilt because she felt provoked. Uh, and if she had lashed out at me, it was my fault. So we have that in black and white, which is great. Um, and was she, or do I know why she was like this? I didn't know the scope and depth of her psychological history, her relationship history, until after it was over, through conversations with people who had known her in her life for a very long period of time. Uh, so, to answer that question, this person, God, how do I do this? Okay, this is very complicated, but I'll just try to make it really simple and really quick. While I was with her, the physical violence started to escalate to a point where eventually she just flat out attacked me and literally beat me to a living pulp. After that, I think she said something along the lines of this. I wrote it down because I kept a journal. She said, "I think I'm just trying to hurt you, and I wonder if I need to be in therapy." And I literally had an ice pack on my face, and I was covered in bruises from like head to toe, literally. I said, "Yeah, okay, that's a great idea. Get the phone book, man." And we did. So she went to a psychologist, and she went alone, and then he asked me to come with her, and we went together. And he sat down with both of us and told us together that she was facing an emotional disorder previously known as borderline personality disorder, more commonly known as emotional dysregulation these days. So then, after it was over, I found out some things about her history. I'm going to back up and just say that the very first time I met her, she did give me this sort of litany of things that she didn't feel good about in her family. She had a very cold, distant father. He was very critical. He didn't acknowledge her. Her voice never. She felt like her voice was never heard. He didn't celebrate anything in the household. They were in terrible poverty. Like, we're talking, didn't have plumbing until like she was 7. She didn't get a birthday present until she was 11. Very Catholic family, 10 children. 3 of the children died just after childbirth. Her brother committed suicide. Her twin sister was hospitalized for severe psychosis. And she claimed that she was molested by her brother. Now, I believed her completely about all of that, including her being molested by her brother. However, and I think her behavior backs that up. So she had an incredibly difficult time as a child. And also, I think now that I've spoken to people, there is a history of mental illness in the family. Depression, suicide, psychosis, borderline personality, depression. It's really, I think she was dealt a pretty seriously shitty card. So, yeah, that basically is her background.
Yeah, sounds like she had a lot of shit going on.
Oh yeah, she did. She really did. She really did, and I think what I heard was now I had observed her going into a dissociative state, also a regressive state, and thankfully my friend Tucker also witnessed her in that state. I have to say just briefly about that. I thought, okay, the scariest thing I thought I'd ever seen was somebody trying to attack me, but that's actually not the scariest thing. The scariest thing was watching that her entire physique, her body, her voice, her eyes would change. Like something had possessed her. I had never been exposed to that before. I don't know what that is, but apparently 90% of all women who go through a dissociative state like that have experienced sexual violence in their lives. So it's a very strong indicator that that severe, extreme sort of psychological state was definitely predicated by an experience that was very traumatic. It's not necessarily true, but it seems all the evidence seems to show that she was telling the truth about that experience that she had.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's really hard to hear about all of this, and you know, I'm very thankful that you can be so open about this. I mean, you're saying like even 2 years ago you would have just been crying about all of this, and
Yeah.
it's commendable that you were able to overcome the trauma of this. I mean, certainly I'm sure you still have your triggers and all of that, but I get what well what did you do to get out of that? And I imagine you faced some initial resistance in getting help. So how did you get out of that, and what help did you get?
Yeah.
Well, actually, okay, so this is all about Tucker. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the team that we have here. So there's 3 of us working on this documentary. There's me. I'm a biracial male victim of domestic violence. And then there's Tucker, who's female to male, transgendered, witness to the violence that I went through. And then there's David, who's our tech guy, who's the token white guy, I guess. So basically, when I was in this relationship, I was also working as a musician, and I was working on this project, producing an album for a band, and I was working really intensely with this trans kid, Tucker, who was much younger. I think Tucker was 20 at the time, I was 42. And going back in this story loop to when my girlfriend told me that I wasn't performing sexually very well, the only lesbian-ish person I knew was Tucker. So I actually talked. I know this is embarrassing. I can't believe I'm saying this, but okay. I had a girlfriend. She wasn't happy, so I had to talk to somebody. I figured, okay, if you don't have a penis, then you probably know what to do with the gear better than I do. So I went to talk to Tucker, and actually that was really helpful. And our sexual relationship completely flourished after that because, I learned to really read her body and to be a far, far more attentive and responsive lover. So Tucker and I sort of bonded about the relationship at that point because he thought it was really fucking funny that this guy who was like, working with him was asking him for sexual advice and with his girlfriend, right? Anyway, so the first time, as I mentioned, she really attacked me. I was in a bit of a daze. She was out of the house. And I remember going back into the bedroom, and I was going to lie down because, like I said, I mean, I was sore. I was covered in bruises and cuts. And I pulled back the sheets, and I looked at where I was lying, and there was blood stains where I was lying. And my first thought was, oh, fuck, she's going to be pissed. I better do the laundry. And I went to reach for the sheets, and then I realized that's the most fucking crazy thought I've ever had in my life. She beat the shit out of me, and I'm scared that what is she going to do to me? She's going to be mad because I got blood on her sheets, right? So I picked up the phone, and I called Tucker right away. And I went over to see him, and I showed him what happened to me. So he was there for that, and he saw what, through the rest of the year, other injuries that I had on my face and my neck and stuff like that. Eventually, she had this pattern of only beating me up when the kids were out of the house. I had my children from my marriage. She had her kid. But on the odd weekend, they weren't there. It was consistent. She would always beat me up. I was terrified one day in November of 2011 that was going to happen. So I was terrified. So I actually asked Tucker to come stay over, and he did. So he was there, and luckily he kept me safe. And he also had a chance to see her in that dissociative state where her face had changed and her voice had changed. She was up all night, repeating herself. She confronted him in the morning, and after she was gone, he he was like, fuck, I had no idea you were living with this. Holy shit. And then a couple of weeks later, maybe, no, 3 weeks later, it got to the point where I had to get out of there. So I called him again, and he got me a van and a couple of his friends to move me out of there. And that's how I got out of there. So that was the end of that. And what was the other question?
About how did you receive help after that? Did you face any challenges?
Right. Right. Well, at first, the first thing I did was I went to a Qigong weekend retreat. Just decided like 2 weeks later to try this thing, and I met a lady at that retreat who happened, when we introduced ourselves, she happened to be a domestic violence abuse counselor. So, I took her aside and said, look, I'm here because of this thing that happened. And she was so kind. She sat and talked to me for hours that day, and the next day, and the next day. I learned tons, and I was like, oh, God, this is fantastic. I was like, look, when this is over, on the third day, I said, where's your office? I'm going to come sign up. I really, need to heal. And she said, oh, she looked like, the look on her face was like she was about to tell me that, I don't know, somebody had run over my parents and my puppy, She said, look, you can't come. And I was like, what do you mean? She said, well, in my office, we rehabilitate men who use violence in domestic violence, and we counsel women who express or have experienced violence. And I felt horrible. I was like, why? You were just talking to me for the whole weekend? She said, yeah, I know. And she said, we have a lot of work to do to reach out to men. And that was crushing. That was a horrible feeling. So I felt stuck. So I didn't do anything. I just got depressed and sort of went into a downward spiral. And then when the tooth thing happened, that broke me. And I think I didn't become suicidal, but I lost my will to live. That was it for me. I remember crossing a street and a car almost hit me, and I didn't flinch. So I called a friend and said, look, man, I need help. I don't know what to do. And that's when I went into not the community, into Capital Mental Health to get an assessment. And I was eventually diagnosed with PTSD, extreme anxiety, depression, and complicated grief, which was interesting. I was, suffering PTSD and anxiety and depression from being horribly abused for a year, but I was also grieving for the loss of a woman who I loved very, very deeply. So that kind of rips you apart, So anyway, when I did eventually try to find some help, I had to do it on my own. There's no real avenue to go. There was a community place here and there that allowed for 1 or 2 free sessions of counseling, so I did all of those that I could find in the city. I found a guy who does neuro-linguistic programming, who is incredibly effective, and he's working on the documentary with me. That's David. So I did that, and then I lucked out and I found an amazing Jesuit priest who, if you know the Jesuits, they all have doctorates, or sometimes 2 PhDs. His background was in counseling, so I talked to him for over a year. He was fantastic. I found a Buddhist who taught me how to do mindfulness and meditation. I went to a free bereavement group to learn how to grieve. And then I found in a community place a therapist who basically dedicated her life to me for about a year and a half. She was incredible. So I had a very circuitous journey that brought me into the arena of a lot of really interesting people, like priests and neuroscientists and Buddhists and counselors. And of course, I also met a social worker named Robert Wright, and I'd love to get into that part of it, whenever you get a chance. Yeah, so I did a lot of different type of stuff.
And
oh, I can't hear anything.
That's because none of us are talking. We put our mics
Okay.
on just to make
Oh,
sure
I see.
the noise
All right.
comes.
Sorry about that.
So now we've kind of come to the documentary itself, which you have
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Indiegogo.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about this? I mean, certainly if people go to the site and, read, they can get a lot, but can you tell us, what this is about, what your goals are with it?
Yeah. Sure. Um, I had the idea a long time ago to do a documentary on this, and I realized that, well, first of all, no one has ever done a documentary on male victims of domestic violence. It's never been covered in that format. So that was a telling thing. Why not? And then I realized documentaries have an incredible influence and power to make change. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Norwegian documentary Journavask, which means brainwash. But basically, it's a 5-part television documentary done by Harald Ila, who is a Norwegian comedian. He basically was looking at the Norwegian gender paradox, the gender equality paradox. Uh, in the Scandinavian countries, they have the best gender equity record on the planet, yet the gender gap when it comes to women being in positions of power and also going into jobs that are traditionally held by men, it's not only stayed, it didn't stay the same, it got bigger. So he was exploring that, right? Eventually, those documentaries dismantled the their basically their government-funded gender studies arena, which had 6 researchers. So that's something to look into. But anyway, I realize that documentaries have an incredible power to communicate. And what my goal is to get the conversation going. Look, whether you're a men's rights activist or a feminist or wherever you stand in that sort of political arena, the fact of the matter is that there is a very, very high percentage of a too high percentage of the population who happen to be male, who have suffered through domestic violence and have no resources. Now, basically, what our goal is if we get this conversation going, it may lead to real change within society. We're not just doing a documentary, we also started a peer support group here in our city, right, for male victims of domestic violence, which is a practical, local thing to do. And anybody can do that. I'd love it if there was one in every city. And it can be a peer support group, right? Anybody can do this. But as far as the goal of the documentary is, it's important for men to feel comfortable about telling their story in this type of, like, if they've had an experience of domestic violence. So you have to sort of demonstrate that. So that's got to be a part of it. The other part of it is we want to look at the reasons behind the wall of silence around it, definitely look at why there are false statistics being put out there, why there are no resources, and we want to talk to people within these fields of social work and psychology, and look at the balanced perspective from different people about why this is, you know. So what we feel we can accomplish is really having a balanced look at the reasons behind why there is a paucity of support for a fairly high percentage of people who experience domestic violence. And then by exposing that, then we will force the change to happen. Because it ain't happening fast enough, and the efforts that people are making aren't working. You know, you can complain all you want about men not having any resources, but unless you're fucking doing something, that doesn't really do anything. It's great to talk about it, but I believe that having a permanent, informed, and researched documentary that can be shown in all sorts of different arenas for educational purposes as well as getting the conversation going is really an important thing. And we are, by the way, definitely making a documentary that is not the typical talking heads only, boring sort of thing. My personal story is fucking amazing because there's so many nuances to it, and it's not just the violence. Actually, there's a whole other side to it. In that it's just wild. I'll get into that later. So my story is actually really kind of interesting, and it's fun. It's heartbreaking. It's fucking biblical in like the betrayal and the horrible shit that happened, and it's also really romantic, and there's love and blood and sex and death, right? So that's awesome.
Are we sure this is not a blockbuster film? Because I think I'd see that.
So other than that, though, we also have we want to use animation, we want to use music, we want to intersperse it. I've got a lot of ideas about using significant lines from poetry that I've got a background in the arts. If you noticed in the pitch, I was using poetry from a 12th century poet named Rumi. The first line is amidst destruction, there is the hope for treasure. And that's really, it encapsulates my story, personally, and the potential story for anybody who goes through domestic violence. It is, the message I want to get out to people is that your experience of domestic violence is a door that you can choose to go through for self-awareness and growth. I'm like an unstoppable optimist, and that might be naive, but I'd rather talk about domestic violence with that kind of bent. Then, if you've ever watched a documentary ever on domestic violence, they are so fucking horrible. They're so you never want to see it again. I want to make a movie about domestic violence that you want to watch 2 or 3 times, because I've watched them all, and it's like, here's this lady who dated a monster. She was put through a grater and strangled and shot in the brain, and they had to replace her brain, and this guy's like buried under the jail, and the children suffered, and it's all suffering, and then everybody, it just sucks, right? It's important to get those stories out, but the approach, holy fuck, you don't want to see it ever again, and you want to put it out of you want to unsee that shit. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't raise awareness, because if you make people completely uncomfortable and horrified, that's not the way to go. The message of hope, yeah, you can look at tragedy and pain and suffering, but you can also take that and go, well, here's the positive outcome. And a real good friend of mine, Dr. Jeff Garabanow, who's the head of social work at Dal, he's constantly talking about all these nuances, like male vulnerability, the fragility of our experience, and how he believes that we can create a culture of hope around this, and that's where I'm headed. So.
And see, that's what, in talking to you previously, looking at everything you've done, and even you being here, it's just like, this is what I love about your project is you are trying to promote actual empathy. You're not trying to scare people into, feeling something. You're like, hey, this is a situation, make your own judgment, but, we don't want to scare you as much as we want you to talk about it. And I think
Sorry, just to interject for 1 second. You know what is awesome? One thing that one of my therapists said that was great. Okay, by the way, I wound up helping 2 social workers create or write a grant to a nonprofit mental health foundation, and they got $6,500 to help with a peer support group. And what she said was, man, it's amazing. You kicked off this thing where you got the entire social workers network, feminists, and well, they're all feminists basically here, but talking about uh, uh, male domestic violence victims. And then I thought, well, when we make this documentary, what's fantastic is that, we've done chats with honey badgers, you guys, skeptic feminist, and hopefully Dr. Christy Winter soon. What I find is amazing is that this is collaboration. This is how this moves forward. Having this conversation with men's rights activists and feminists, and everybody agreeing and going, yeah, fuck yeah, we should totally work on this shit. That's fucking amazing. And I'm really excited about that. That's how this is going to move forward. So I'm really stoked about that. Sorry, I had to just be happy about that for a second.
Don't interrupt. But that's what I like about you is that you're absolutely right with what you said. I mean, a lot of us just talk about it. I mean, me, all I do is talk about it. I mean, if I could get out there and do something, I would. I would really love to. Unfortunately, I'm severely limited. So it's like my contribution to your project is having you on today, hoping that people out there want to donate to you or bring you on their channel. And hopefully, this gives you something. But you're perfect. You're 100% right that there's a time for talking, which we've done a lot of, and it's necessary. And then there's a time to do something, and that's where you come in. And we need to start living in a world where people start doing something to really make a change. And there are many people out there. I mean, we had Elka on here a few weeks ago, and she wants to open up a male shelter. I believe it was for domestic violence. So she's looking to do that somewhere in the United States. She has everything she needs as far as an education for it, a lot of support for it. She just needs the money for it. You're wanting to do a documentary to get it out to as many people, but you're starting a peer group in your area to give men somewhere a place to at least talk about it. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, for those reasons, that's why people should donate to you, to help you out, because we need more people out there like you. And unfortunately, we live in a world today that the only way you're going to get money is if you show a little cleavage. And, well, you're not a woman, so you can't do that.
That doesn't mean I don't have cleavage. I put on a couple pounds.
That's the spirit.
I put on a couple of pounds in the last little while, right? So, listen, man, I'll do anything. I don't care. If you want to, if it's going to get me a donation, for $25, that gets you cleavage. Donate, I'll do it. Right?
Yes.
But yeah, we
although I don't think it's a good idea. I'll tell you why. Look, I don't know if you can tell it. Look at my beard. It's salt and pepper, right? You know what's funny? Once you start to get I'm 48, you're getting old when you actually have a gray chest hair. It's really weird. So I don't think anybody wants to.
Well, I don't have any chest hair, so I guess I'll never know when I get old. I'm all smooth.
Anyway, look, I am actually really excited about this project. I wanted to let people know when it comes to the documentary. Look, we have a goal set for $30,000. Right now we're at $580 or $590. We have a month left. I hope people don't look and go, well, they'll never reach their goal. The reason for that is if we make a third of our goal, that's success. And we will continue to crowdfund and raise funds to get this documentary done. The goal itself is attainable. And if you look at the documentaries that have been made about female victims of domestic violence, say, for instance, there's one in Canada coming up called A Better Man, like $200,000. We'll say there's the Red Pill thing that was almost, the Red Pill documentary, that was almost dead in the water, but it just simply turned around when one person wrote an article about it, I think it was Milo, and all of a sudden it was inundated with tons of money. We're not even looking for anywhere close to that kind of money. But one person can make a huge difference, or a whole whackload of people with little donations could make a lot of difference. So I would hope that people will go, okay, we have confidence they're going to make this documentary. And, if we don't attain our full goal, we will put every penny into the gear that we need and the next step. We'll do a great trailer, and then we'll continue. That's what we need to do. So I feel incredibly positive now about this, but also we kind of knew going into it, this is an uphill battle. There's even men's rights activists, and I've heard this before, they don't know how to talk about domestic violence that well because, well, there's no historical precedent for the conversation. You know, there's nobody out there doing a tour at universities or out there on TED talking about male victims of domestic violence. There's lots of people doing that when they're talking about education. There's lots of people talking about that, the education part of it. You know, how boys aren't doing very well in education, or there's fewer men in universities. There's lots of people talking about male suicide. There's lots of people talking about male homelessness, transients. Everything but domestic violence is kind of got more exposure. So we want to get that exposure and get the conversation going on that topic and make it so that people have the vocabulary and the precedent set to talk about male victims of domestic violence.
So, what I heard in all of that is everyone tweet to Milo and tell him to write a story on this.
Yes.
Or
So
Jack,
that way they can
or
get
Jack
lots of
Hadfield.
funding. What's up?
Or Jack Hadfield. Jack
Yeah.
Hadfield would be a good person to do that as well. And
So
not
tweet
only that, but if
Milo
there's
and
anybody
Jack-
out there, we're looking for press, obviously, and exposure. But if there's anybody out there who wants to do a chat, we'd love to talk to some more YouTubers on the whole spectrum. Because what I love is having this conversation with different people,
Me too.
and seeing where they come from, you know, and what their attitudes are about it. And that's fascinating to me. Also, it's great every single time I get to talk about this, or somebody on my team gets to talk about it. That's one more conversation out there. It was really cool when my friend Tucker talked about it, because he talked about something really interesting. Now, he's a trans guy, right? Trans man, born female, transitioning to male. And I went to go to his house to show him my beaten to a bloody pulp body. And he didn't take pictures. He didn't call the police. He didn't tell me to stay. He sent me back home. And we talked about that afterwards, because it was like, what the fuck did you do that for? You know what I mean? Like, you should have kept me there. Fuck. Because I went through another year of horrible abuse. And he was like, yeah, you're right. If you had had a girl's body, I would have freaked out. I would have told my dad, you know, that you're staying here tonight, and he would have freaked out and probably tried to beat up your boyfriend. He said, I just didn't know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're coming up with so that's great that he had that conversation, right? And the other guy, David, who's was a counselor of mine who did the NLP, he got to talk about some of the approaches, or hopefully he'll get a chance to talk about some of the approaches. Now, one thing I did want to talk about was PTSD and triggers and all that sort of stuff. Just quickly, because this is a huge thing. I thought when I first heard about when I was diagnosed with PTSD, I thought, oh, fuck. Because, you know, apparently you have to live with it for the rest of your life. And that can be true. However, that felt like a death sentence. Because, by the way, it sucks. However, when I went to the alternative approach of therapy for PTSD, which was NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, something really cool happened. I was having panic attacks every time I saw a brunette with glasses, actually.
Damn.
Not even joking. I mean, so that got ridiculous, right? So just picture being triggered by pretty brunettes with glasses. That's shitty, right? I didn't want to live with that, right? So I went to this guy, and I said, look, I had a horrible panic attack when I saw her about a year after it was over. And in about a 3-hour session, he made it so I never had another panic attack when I saw her again. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I thought I had to live with this for the rest of my life. But they're gone. Completely wiped out. Doesn't bother me when I see her at all. Brunettes don't scare me anymore. At all. That's astonishing to me. The literature out there and what you hear about PTSD, and people use this, is that, oh, you're stuck with it for life, and you're going to have triggers, and everybody has to sort of like live with this thing, this bubble around you. And it's just not true. I had extreme, severe, kill you panic attacks that put me sometimes. I was on disability because I couldn't work, and there was times when I was like home for 3 weeks. My heart rate, if I had a panic attack, I remember going to the doctor once. It was at 116 5 days after I had a panic attack. My resting heart rate. That's fucking fast. And that's horrible, you know? But that's starting to change. I still have anxiety. And I'm working on the tail end of my healing journey, going into maintenance. But I want to give people hope that if you do have PTSD and you haven't really tried every approach to heal it, you must know that it is possible, absolutely 100%, to live in a way where you don't have to fear having a panic attack all the time. They will happen, they will come, but not as frequently as you might think, and not as bad, you know?
And that
So I
is
think that's incredibly important.
such a great thing to hear. Because when it comes to trigger warnings and panic attacks and PTSD, the only things that we hear about today is about how women get it just from being on Twitter, or how a dog gets it from listening to Christina Hoff Sommers. You know, we people just have abused what it means to have a panic attack to as simple as, I disagree with you, and it's like, oh, I have a panic attack. Oh, I'm scared now. Or if someone says, hey, Vanessa, you're sexy today, and you decide that you can't get out of bed because I sexualized you. I mean, that's what we're seeing today.
Well,
and
let me
can't. Let me finish this thought.
Sure. Look, I can't really comment on that stuff too much because I'm concerned with letting people know that if you do have PTSD, that you can stop that shit. So if you're getting triggered, like if your dog gets triggered by Christina Hoff Sommers, there's hope for the dog. And if you do get triggered because someone says you're pretty, there's hope that you can stop that shit. And because nobody wants to be triggered, nobody wants to be upset. Well, that theoretically, we all want to be happy, right? So if you spend a lot of time being triggered and upset all the time, you want that to stop, right? So it's really important that people get triggered less, and they know that they can pull that off with a fair minimum of effort. And it can make great gains really, really fast. And that's incredibly important.
Well,
you know, I'm not saying that you can erase it forever or whatever. Everybody's brain is different neurologically, but it is possible. Through neuroplasticity, our brains are malleable and they can change. If that pathway is getting you triggered, you can reroute that pathway. It's proven, and that's the way it is. You know.
And no, you're certainly correct about that. But you know, the point that I was going to make is that people are misusing what it means to be triggered. That they're not actually being triggered. They just want people to think they are. They want people to make special exceptions to them, and it always pisses me off when I see that. So it's such a relief, someone actually saying, you know what? Yeah, I get triggered, and I got over it. No one has to change for me. I've got to learn to adapt to the rest of the world. So it's such a great thing to hear someone say that.
Well, hang on a sec here. Now, that's wonderful. I appreciate that a lot. But you have to remember that I was having panic attacks constantly, and they suck. So this was not me trying to conform to the world or anything, or sort of make any kind of statement. It was just like, fuck this. This sucks. I'm not doing this shit anymore. I can't live like this. I went everywhere I could to say, stop this fucking panic attack shit. And if you can't help me, point me to somebody who can. Because it sucks. And nobody wants to be in that position. But I do understand psychologically there are people who love to call attention to themselves, and but that could be done with anything.
Certainly.
But there is a bit. I suppose there could be a bit of a culture around that. There obviously seems to be a culture of hypersensitivity in universities in particular, and all that. But that's not really my focus or my purview. The only thing I can speak to those people is to say that Okay, panic attacks suck. It's sucky. So you don't want to be triggered anymore, and you don't want to have panic attacks anymore, and you can pull that off. So you can walk around being happier and not as triggery. And I'm not being critical. I'm just saying this is hope, right? That's my attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's such a great attitude to have, in all honesty. It's something that we need to see more in this world is, you're responsible for you. And if
Yeah.
you don't want panic attacks anymore, you need to go out there and find a way to get over them. You need, if you can't do it on your own, find someone to help you. And
Yeah.
that's why I like
It's
enlisting
possible.
you,
You
is you
can
take
you
that
can.
responsibility.
Now, I was particularly lucky in that I found somebody who is a skilled practitioner at neurolinguistic programming, which for me was very, very effective, astonishingly effective. So that was great. But I also had a great counselor, and through narrative therapy, which, by the way, is the type of approach that makes the subject, not you can go in there and saying, I've got a problem. I let my girlfriend beat me up, and so there's something wrong with me. But narrative therapy is like, no, a problem happened to you. You're not the problem. A problem happened to you. So it goes from the existential, I am the problem, to experiential, I experienced a problem. This takes you out of the victim state, which is incredibly important too. Um, that's incredibly important to switch to make that shift from existential, I exist, I am a victim, to no, I experienced something that, well, hurt. That's a huge attitude shift, eh? But I also have to talk quickly about the meditation practice and what that really means, because a lot of people meditate or think that can help. I want to frame that it's incredibly important. I found my meditative practice with my Buddhist friend has been incredibly difficult and very, very painful, and I just took it seriously. I went into retreats for 8 straight weeks, 36 hours, complete silence, in isolation. So that's a pretty heavy go at it, so I know 36 hours with no talking, you're isolated, you might see one person when you go to eat, but no talking, right? 8 straight weeks of that. What meditation is not anything other than, in my opinion, in the practice, the way I approached it, is non-judgment. You're sitting and you're trying to still your mind and focus on your breath or on your body or something like that. What happens is a thought will come in and you go, the thought comes up and you go, okay, I want to push that thought away, or oh God, I'm being critical, or I'm doing. What they teach you to do is don't label the thought. You don't judge it, nothing. It's constant non-judgment. And what I found was that practice really, really helped me to be less judgmental. And that actually increased my empathy. I think going to an ideological perspective, if you become a feminist, you'll be more empathetic. Not necessarily. You might become a lot more judgmental. I don't know if you've noticed that. Or if you become a men's rights activist, you'll become more empathetic. But wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of people you're in opposition to. Why would you want to label yourself as an anti-feminist? Why would you want to be anti-anything? Why not just be kind of like, do your thing, but kind of support wherever you find common ground with people and be more positive and less judgmental, which is a lot more of a, cool way to go. Hey, nice Ibanez. Sweet. I play guitar.
No, I can certainly see that perspective.
Oh, thanks. I forgot it was.
Sorry, I also have ADD, so that was my squirrel moment. That was like, squirrel.
Oh, guitar.
Yeah, I did that with strip clubs. Strip club.
Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much, but so you had some really interesting questions last time we chatted. Do you want to touch base on anything there?
Well, we're going to kind of bring this to a close, but I do kind of want to respond to that last statement because I can certainly see your perspective. Why define yourself as a feminist or a men's rights activist or an anti-anything, an anti-feminist? Why not just be what you are? And that's all well and great, and I can definitely see that perspective, but the reason why, some of us identify as a men's rights activist, or me as an egalitarian, or an anti-feminist, is because the line has already been drawn. And I feel that feminists have drawn this line that it's like if you're not with us, you're against us. And it's not that we necessarily want to be against feminism. It's just that we're put into that default position. So a lot of, especially women, state that they're anti-feminist to specifically say, hey, we are for equality, we want to see equality happen, but we don't think that feminism is the right way to do it. Men's rights activists, it's just making that statement out there to say that we care about men. We think men need a lot of attention. Now, you are right that sometimes being within a group can bring you a certain level of empathy, but can also take away a certain level of empathy, and that's the biggest challenge to have within any group. And I think that's really what's happened within feminism, is that they've been so involved within this mindset that they've started to lose empathy for basically the whole world. Whatever they think is absolutely correct, and if you're just even slightly different of opinion, you're just completely against everything they stand for, and you're just this horrible person. There's no empathy there. Within the men's movement, I do think that there's still a level of empathy, and that's what I fight for. So,
well, individuals. Okay, let me put it this way. I guess by default, I'm a men's rights activist because I'm actively doing stuff to help men. I don't know about the rights part of it. I don't think I don't know. I can't say that we all have the right to. I don't know. Look, I can't even say that we have the right to heal. You can if you want, but I mean, I don't know if it's a right, right? I mean, rights are a construct. It's an abstract to me that I can't get into. But I do want to say this: there is my only concern when it comes to feminists are the ones who have caused harm and damage in the work that I'm doing. And I'll give you an example. That $6,500 grant that we got with 2 social workers who were all over it, both feminists, when that check was delivered to the community social workplace, the lady who was the head of that was on her way out transitioning to a new leadership. The new leadership, also a feminist, decided that she wanted nothing to do, she did not want to support that grant. She did not want to have men talking about being wounded by women in her, not in her house. So that feminist, it was written by feminists, successful, and then killed by a feminist. That woman did something bad. She caused harm because there are men out there. If you call victim services here in Halifax, 36% of all the calls they get about domestic violence are from men. That's 1,100 to 1,200 men per year calling in on average. That's 36%. Most people think 90% of all domestic violence is perpetrated by men against women. Totally, totally false. That woman caused harm because there are men out there who needed that healing, needed that to happen, and she forced us to do it on our own, which took another 2 years. See, that causes harm. And then when it comes to, say, Jacqueline Campbell, the researcher, the PhD and researcher from Johns Hopkins University, which is a very reputable university, falsified stats about black men. She, twice in this statement, which actually led to legislation, basically said that the leading cause of death for black women is black men. And not even joking, proven to be falsified, and that's a horrible thing to say, and it's completely untrue. The real leading cause of death, not just for black women or white women or Chinese women, is the same all over the world. It's old fucking age. People think, again, with false stats, if you walk down the street and said, what do you think the leading cause that a woman winds up in the emergency room is? Do you think it's domestic violence? They would say, fuck, yeah, probably. No, it's tripping over something in your house, like your kid or your snake. That's the leading cause of injury in the emergency for everybody worldwide, is tripping over something. So why do we believe that most of the domestic violence is caused by men against women? It's not true. Why do we believe that most of the injuries caused to women to go to the emergency is are caused by men. It's not true. I want to explore why we believe these things. Who's saying that stuff? And stop it, you bastard. I'm only concerned with feminists who do that stuff. Why would you kill a grant? Why would you have a policy that excludes men from receiving counseling? When you work with domestic, or you work with the police, who know that 36% of all the people that are calling are men. It seems ludicrous to me. There's an imbalance there. Do you see that? There's an imbalance. We only help women, but 36% of the population is experiencing the same thing. Maybe out of the 6 counselors, they could dedicate 1. You know?
Yeah. Well, yeah. We're having a great conversation, but we do need to come to a close today. We're reaching our limit. So I want to go ahead and flash your Indiegogo campaign for everyone out there. And can you tell us a little bit about this page? What people might find when
Sure. So, okay, well, there's a couple of pieces of video. One is an introduction to Tucker and his little bit on his role in my life, and his thoughts on the whole thing. And there's a pitch, and of course there's perks, and all the information's there. There's a story there about how this came to be, and what we would love, really, honestly, guys, anybody out there at all who's watching this or hearing about it, we need people to mirror this thing. We need people to support it, of course. We would really, really like for people to get a campaign to get it out there and get it into the arenas where people will fund it. So, if the Red Pill documentary wound up with $250,000, all those folks who dedicated even a $10 or a dollar to donation of that or whatever, well, I'm sure they'd be interested in this documentary, and we can do it for a lot less. But I really, honestly feel it needs to be made. This piece of film will make a difference, and the people who care would love it if you get behind it. We just need more exposure. We need more press. We need people to talk about it, and we need people to share it. And of course, we need people to donate to it. That's really important. We've got about a month left, so we're hoping that we can ramp up the interviews and talking about it and sharing, and then what people can do is, if anybody like say some of the heavy hitters in the sphere of men's issues, get it under their noses. I would love it if there was like a whole whackload of people that got in touch with, say, Jack Hadfield or Milo, or got a hold of a Voice for Men, and is it Paul Elam and Dean Esme and all those folks. Just really make them see that this is an important thing. I thought there would be a lot more support from men's rights activists, to be honest. It seems to be minimal. But maybe that's because it's a difficult, groundbreaking thing. This has never been done. I'm excited about that.
And that's my hope for today's video is, get you a foot into the door of that, because, I definitely am within the men's movement, and I want you to get as much exposure as possible. You've gotten $590, 16 backers. I mean, that's a very good start. You've got 25 days left. Anyone watching this video, just $1. Take it from me, $1 means a lot. So, I mean, just put it out there. But, yeah, tweet this out, because this is the kind of thing that needs to get made. We need to get people to start talking about this. Because if, this gets made, then people talk about it. And people talk about it, then it gets to politicians. And if politicians are talking about it, then we can get services out, for these things. So we don't have to worry about some person somewhere saying, oh, I don't want to do this. We make a law that says, well, let's change Violence Against Women's Act to just Violence Against People Act. to say that
Yeah.
any violence against anyone is illegal. Let's not put special circumstances on women and say they can be the only true victims. And how we do that is things like this. So
That's right.
we need to
And if
get
you could,
this.
yeah, you're right. Yeah. And if you can imagine, if somebody looks and goes, oh, geez, I can't donate like $600 to this. Just imagine if 600 people donated $1. That boom, that cranks it up a notch, right? It's just really having that. The crowdfunding is about getting a crowd together and all contributing, right? So I'd love to get more exposure and just let people know that it's going to make a difference. Anything you can donate will absolutely get us on the way. And we're making this thing no matter what. We'll just have to keep going and fund again and keep going. We hope to get close to our goal or get our goal. And I think that's totally doable. We just have to have the right people on board. There's got to be some rich MRA out there who wants to chuck $10,000 at us, right? Who knows? But anyway, look, I really appreciate the time, both of you, a lot. And I really appreciate anybody else that you can get this out to. And yeah, this is great. Really exciting.
We're going to do our closing up right now.
Yeah.
So is there anything final you want to say? I know you've talked a lot about this, but is there anything a final note you want to leave on?
Yeah. The final note is, for anybody watching this, if there's anybody in your life who you know who is a male, identifies as male, who's going through some sort of domestic violence situation, you have to understand there is no helpline, there is no hotline, there are no resources, there's nowhere for him to go, and if you happen to know anybody like that, you've got to reach out yourself, because it's highly likely that this person, if you suspect that person is going through any kind of abuse, whether it be psychological or violent, please reach out to your friends and help them on your own. Have that conversation with them. This stuff has to change from the grassroots level of people interacting with other people. Don't be afraid to ask about your friends' relationships if you think they're wonky.
Definitely. And Vanessa, is there anything you want to say? I know you've been pretty silent on this one.
I've just been listening and taking it all in, but yeah, thank you for coming on and telling us about your story, and it's definitely important to continue talking about it and continue striving towards getting people to talk about it and support it.
Cool. Thanks.
And I guess my final note on all of this, I mean, pretty much Vanessa said what I think. Is like, yeah, we need to keep talking about it. But, we've got a lot of people talking about it now that it's happening, and it's not reaching to the places that we need to. So the next step from here is let's make a video about it. Let's make a documentary, and, the best person on the job seems to be already there doing it. So, but like he said, even if they don't make it this time around or they don't make their goal, they're still going to be working on it. That's a great attitude to have. I know so many people out there, they feel like if they can't get it this time around, they're just going to quit forever. This is going to be
God, no.
another, and that's what I respect most about you, Mal.
Thanks.
So that's going to do it for us today. I thank everyone for coming into the chat room. We should be on next week sometime around this time, so definitely look out for us there. In the description down below is the link to the Indiegogo campaign. So once again, you got $1, just, it helps out so much. So just,
or if you have 10,000, that does too.
If you just have $10,000, that can help out so much.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's going to do it from me. As always, this is Dick.
And I'm Boops.
I'm thinking now it's going to be like, and I'm Al. Everyone have a good week.
All right.